right, we're back here on the Full Ride on the Chase Amos podcast, where we're taping this on a different day this week because Matt Green won some tickets courtesy of the Friends of the Pod and the good folks over there at 680 The Fan, where Matt answered a sports trivia question that the listeners should know. I also guessed correctly when he asked me what the question was, that he won said Braves tickets for that Wednesday night. Keith Folk was the answer for 2004 Red Sox. I don't know why I remember that so vividly, but I do remember it was Keith Folk. A very memorable closer in our lifetime. But Matt, you picked a great game to win tickets for. Were you there till the end? Did you stay to the walk-off in the bottom of the ninth?
Oh, without a doubt, man. I don't leave games early.
Okay.
I don't do it. So
ever?
Yeah. No, I'm sure I've left a game early at some point, especially a Braves regular season game. But I go to so few games, like you might as well. You're not beating any traffic leaving early, right? Just stick it out. So yeah, Orlando Arcia. I was bummed, on the way down there. Found out Acuna wasn't in the lineup, but Orlando Arcia, man, with the walk-off bomb. But yeah, as far as that trivia question goes, I feel like at some point years ago, answering trivia questions, my friends would just be like, "How do you know that?" In not an impressed way, in like a kind of condescending way, and that's why I just started answering like, "How do I know anything that I know?" Like, I don't know. Why does my mind remember who closed out the games for the '04 Red Sox and not other important things in my life? I honestly can't answer it, but yeah, it was nice. It's the second time I've won tickets via 680. So
there you go.
The last time was 6-7 years ago. I actually had to drive down to the studio and get them. But this time they just emailed them to me. It was pretty sweet.
Technology, we've moved past it where it's like, yeah, can you imagine we had to drive to the Dunwoody location in rush hour traffic because there was not a good way to. I mean, I worked at that location. Now they're at the Battery. It's pretty going to pick them up now would actually not be a problem. You're already there. So if you go pick them up from 680 now, you take 30 steps the other way and you're at the stadium. So it works out. Well, that's good. I'm glad you're able to go and that it was a good ending because it's been a weird, rocky start to this 2022 Braves title defense.
Not only that, I got to give a shout out to my mom. It's her birthday today, and my dad's birthday was actually Tuesday. So I was like, I won free tickets. Let me go ahead and offer these to my parents for a birthday present, and they couldn't make it. So I also have the credit of trying to give a good birthday gift, but also they declined it. So which was ideal for me.
What was the reason?
Honest.
Too late? Are they?
My mom's she's a retired math teacher.
Yeah, she's in bed 9 o'clock. I'm not staying there late.
No, she was tutoring actually, for kids finals coming up, I guess. So, So luckily we I got both credit for both. So it was solid.
Well, now you don't, because now Mama Green is going to listen to this and be like, "Oh, that wasn't a real gift."
It was a real offer. I put it out there though, if they wanted to go, because I don't think my dad is yet to go to a game at Truist Park. So he's just one of those people. He's just not going to get outside his comfort zone. So we'll have to get him to a game at some point.
I mean, that happens to all of us, man. As we get older, my dad's like that. The fiance's dad's like that. It's just a part of men getting older, is we just get more and more entrenched in our comfort zones and not changing. And you spoke to the useless sports knowledge that people I remember when I was at UGA journalism camp going into my senior year of high school. That was one of my favorite camps. I'm not a camp guy, did not grow up being a camp guy, and still had so much fun. It's the only good thing to ever come out of Athens, Georgia, is this journalism camp. And had a great time, met so many cool people, still friends today. And it was such a nerdy thing to love, but it was great. I love journalism camp at UGA. And we got to work with Red and Black and do all that, but it was cool. Outside of the whole Georgia Bulldog thing, and I remember there was this girl there who I think actually ended up going to UT, but she described me as a walking sports encyclopedia, and I wore that as a badge of honor. 17-year-old Chase was like, "Yeah, thank you. That's one of the kindest things a person can say about me." And then I found out later, if a girl in high school calls you a walking sports encyclopedia, it's not a positive. She was like, oh, this guy just a walk, like the way you say it. There's like, oh, he's like a walking sports encyclopedia, and then there's the other way of saying it, which is like he's like a walking sports encyclopedia, and that's what I think it was. And I completely misread the situation at the time.
Hey, one person's trash is another person's treasure. So, that may not have done anything for some women out there, but, others may have been like, he remembers those sports facts. That's very impressive. So I've yet to meet a girl that's that impressed by it, but that doesn't mean they're not out there.
I don't need it. Like I'm not trying to impress my significant other with my sports knowledge. It's more of like it is what it is. It's one of those where I can't control it, and when you get older, and I feel like you probably have this too, where you're like, there's no point in fighting it. Like I'm gonna know who Keith Folk is, and I'm gonna know who the Red Sox closer in 2004 was. I'm gonna know just all kinds of ridiculous things that I wish I didn't know about sports. Like that's just how I'm like. I was getting up when I was 7 years old, memorizing the top 25 on Saturday mornings in the paper. Like I am who I am at this point. Like that's just in there. So there's parts of my brain where I've told the fiance and other people where it's like I'm just bad at names now. Like if I meet you, I got to know that I'm going to see you again if I'm going to retain the name. Like it's difficult for me because my brain, like I'll remember, I can tell you what Jaylen Brown did in the third quarter in the Celtics game last night, and I cannot tell you what I had for breakfast yesterday. It's just one of those where I retain such weird stuff that it's just a weird thing, but it's life. It is what it is.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's it's our cross to bear. What can you do?
Speaking of what can you do, Matt Green, the ACC is going to do some stuff. They are going to pivot, it looks like, in 2023 to a 3-5-5 scheduling format, and this is a variation of the pod formats that. When you listen to folks around the league, this is what's coming. Divisions will be going away. And as we've always joked about on this very program, we don't even know what the divisions are in the ACC. We couldn't, if we had a gun to our head and we had to name who was in the Coastal and who was in the Atlantic, I don't think we would bat 1,000 on that one. So
I feel like last season I made like a conscious effort to remember it, and I feel like it's already gone. Like I just...
Do you want to do it right now? Do you want to test
Coastal, it? I honestly, probably not. Honestly, like I don't. Do you have it pulled up?
I'm gonna pull it up. If you want to do it, I'm here for it. All right.
So off the top of my head, I want to say Clemson's in the Atlantic.
Okay. Yes, you're one for one.
So we got Clemson and Miami.
Wrong. Already.
Oh man, that's the first one. So yeah, it just doesn't mean anything. The Atlantic Coast Conference, break it down in Atlantic versus Coastal. It's because they didn't want to do it North versus South because all those new Big East teams would all kind of be together in the North.
It'd be like the Big Ten West,
Miami.
Big Ten East type situation where it's like super stacked in one side and super weak in the other. Because it's so weird that Syracuse is in the Atlantic and then you have Pitt in the Coastal. How does that work? How are these two teams not in the same division?
It just doesn't make any sense at all, really. But I love to see them throwing out this 3-5-5 model because I hate the pods. Like I just do not like the idea of the pods. The pods works in probably any sport that isn't just like drenched in tradition like college football is. Like the tradition is just what makes college football what it is. So if you're talking about let's like kind of World Cup style, like you have all the top seeds, broken down in each group, the two seeds broken down in each group. Like you could create some even pods that way, but to not have some of those traditional rivalries played every single year, like that's what complicates things. So it's like this is what I've talked about for the SEC, going this 3 locked rival type schedule. With the SEC going to 16 teams, it would have to be a 3-6-6 rotation. They'd have to go to 9 conference games to begin with. So that's already...
Which is what they should do.
That is what they should do, for sure. But I love seeing the ACC do this. I was surprised at some of these locked rivals, like Miami, Virginia Tech. I feel like that was always kind of one of those classic rivalries kind of going back to the Big East. So that's not one of these that's on here. But For the most part, I feel like they did a really good job. Like Miami playing Florida State, Boston College, and Pitt every year. Like there is some tradition there with some of those older Big East teams, Boston College and Pittsburgh playing Miami. So I like it. Clemson playing NC State, Georgia Tech, and FSU. Like those all seem to make sense. And I think the best part about it is with just everybody playing everybody twice in a 4-year span. Like that's just they're all in the same conference if we're doing it that way. I think my biggest like hold up on the pod system is how do you determine who goes to the conference championship? Like it's just like do you have a conference semifinal so that if there's 4 pods that these pods are
BCS for college.
It's like you're not going to do that. You're not going to have 2 rounds of conference tournament, conference championship or whatever. So that's my biggest holdup on the pods. I think if you do it in this way, you have to get rid of divisions. And I think you could have like some issues. Like right now, there's no issue. Like I know like a famous one in 2007 when Tennessee went to the SEC championship. That was the last time Tennessee went to the SEC championship, right? Like Georgia was a top 5 team. Like I think most people agreed Georgia was better than Tennessee that year. But the one time they faced each other, Tennessee blew them out of the water that year. So, like, they had that they were tied in the SEC standings, and Tennessee won head-to-head. Like, as frustrating as Georgia fans may have been that they were one of the hottest teams in the country by season end, like, you couldn't argue that Tennessee won the East that year. So, you could run into a problem of, like, some tied teams. Like, the Big 12 doesn't have that issue. Like, no divisions. Everyone's playing everybody. The records are what they are, and they're legitimate. Like you could run into an issue where there's some teams tied at the top where they didn't play each other, and you kind of have to figure something out. But I think it works better than the pod system.
Yeah, I think that's right. I worry. I don't like this universal approach from conference to conference. So I think the SEC is like, man, if you get down to it, like which 3 are Tennessee picking? Which 3 is Georgia picking as their locked-in rivals? Like that's hard, man. It's it sounds great.
I have some data. I have those pairings. If you want,
I'm ready. Yeah, give it to it.
For Tennessee, I had Vanderbilt, Florida, and Alabama. So
we lose Georgia.
You do lose Georgia, but the third Saturday in October, while it doesn't seem like a big rivalry the last 10, 15 years since Saban arrived, like that is still a traditional rivalry that Tennessee has. For Georgia, I have Florida, Auburn, and South Carolina. Like some of them start to get a little trickier. Like when you got Oklahoma jumping into the conference, like they don't necessarily have those built-in rivalries like other teams have. But like someone like Texas, like Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Arkansas, like that's great. Like that just you want those certain rivalries. So like with Alabama, it's tough. Like I had Alabama with Auburn, Ole Miss, and Tennessee.
Okay.
But also LSU, like Alabama, LSU, it's not necessarily like a rivalry per se.
Stay. That's one, yeah.
But the last 10, 15 years, it's become such a huge rivalry. So it's not perfect. We'd have to figure it out. But like I was actually like, so I started building it out, not only what the locked rivalries would be, but then what that 6-6 rotation would be. And so like I took one team, because like when I posted this on Twitter, like I don't know, a year ago, a lot of people kind of disagreed that how unbalanced these locked rivalries were, right? So like someone like Kentucky, I had South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Mississippi State as their 3 locked rivals. So you look at that and you're like, so Texas has to play Oklahoma, A&M, and Arkansas, and Kentucky's over here playing these cupcakes or whatever, cupcakes by SEC standards. But then if you look, like they're going to be rotating those other 12 teams for the other 2 years. So like, yeah, Kentucky might only have South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State every year. But then one year they might play Oklahoma, Georgia, Auburn, and Texas A&M. The next year they might play Alabama, LSU, Florida, and Texas. So like, no one's hiding from these gauntlet of schedules. Like I think if you do it in this way, it's almost impossible to not have a gauntlet of an SEC schedule. Like, and this would just be, it would be incredible, honestly. I think before the conference went to 14 teams back in 2012, like the rotation was so good. Like everyone is going to play everyone in a 4-year span. And so we got to get back to that. We've talked ad nauseum how many times about how Georgia has yet to play at Texas A&M, even though they've been in the conference for what 10 years. Was that the 10th year they were in the conference this past year? So we got to do something to make the conference the scheduling more balanced. Like you see someone like Tennessee who has Alabama and Georgia every year on their schedule. Someone like Auburn that's got Alabama and Georgia every year, in addition to the SEC West. And they're also not shy about scheduling big time non-conference games either. So like that should be encouraged. But right now, like Auburn is doing themselves a huge disservice every time they go out and schedule a home and home with Penn State, schedule a big time neutral site game with Oregon, because like they're still having this gauntlet in the SEC West. So I think if you go to this rotation, everyone will play everyone in a 2-year span, and everyone will play everyone twice in a 4-year span. Like you're not worried about the locked rivals, because everything's going to kind of come out in the wash, right? Like everyone is going to have these tough schedules. So I love that the ACC is doing this. I'm hoping this will catch on, and the SEC will do the same thing, because like if you're making pods, like you have an obligation to make the pods as fair and as even as possible, right? And if you do that, you're going to lose some of those traditional rivalry games that we see every year.
The one thing I worry, and I was talking about this with Graham last night on the pod, this is one of those where I think we need fans in the room. Like, I think you need like 3 season ticket holders in the room when you have these discussions, where these people that don't go to games and don't care about these universities and don't care about the Saturdays. And I think we have to consider why college football attendance is in steady decline. And it's interesting because I'm not going to name the podcast, but there was a podcast that I was listening to on my run the other day, and I respect these guys and they're really smart in this industry, but one of the things that they were talking about, and I disagreed, I want to get your perspective on this, is that like, yes, more variety, and it's silly that Georgia and Texas A&M, like Georgia's not traveled to Texas A&M. That can be true. That can be silly. However, I think their point and what they were emphasizing was like, oh, how great is it to get more variety and give Florida that, because Florida has not been to Fayetteville very often, and they have not done that very often since which is crazy because they've been in the SEC for as long as they have. Great. But by and large, most fans, like if you want to help attendance and you want to fix some of these problems, you don't like break up what already works. Do you get what I'm saying? Where you don't remove the things that already are fine. Don't break more things in the effort to like fix other things. So it's like, I understand the damned if you do, the damned if you don't, but like
cut off
rivalries,
your nose to spite your face.
Yes, exactly. That sort of thing where it's like rivalries are one of the last things that we have that we can recognize from what we grew up with college football, with so much change so quickly and the volatility in the sport year to year, that like one of the last remaining things that college football fans have, and one of the last few things that they really, really care, that separates college football from the pros and from the NFL and from what it was, is that it's about Saturdays, and it's about rivalry games, and it's about Tennessee, Florida. It's about Tennessee, Kentucky. It's about Tennessee, Georgia. It's about Tennessee, Alabama. It's not about the playoff. It's not about the variety. There's not a Tennessee fan in attendance for Tennessee, Georgia that's like, I would rather give this up for an opportunity to go to Missouri more often or go to Ole Miss more often. That's a complete misunderstanding of what the college football fan actually wants. So when you like, if you ask any Tennessee diehard or any season ticket holder, they are not going to say, I wish there was more variety in our schedule. What they are going to say is, preserve the rivalries, keep that going, but get rid of the Kent State, get rid of the buy-in games.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
If you're a Georgia fan, this schedule sucks. Like, if you are paying a lot of money to go to these Georgia home games this fall, the Oregon game's not at home, which is a huge bummer because that would have been a big thing. That would have made this home schedule look a lot better. But you don't have that at home, and then you look at the rest of this calendar. It's like Tennessee's your best home game this year, and that's it.
Far.
And you're like, what am I paying for? Like, this is a lot of money, and it's going up in price. And if you have that many, like, you got to get rid of the buy-in games, and I understand that hurts the buy-in schools, but just pay them. Like, do a revenue sharing or something like that, just to be like, hey, the money we make from the college football playoff and everything else in our television revenue, we just give y'all a percentage.
Spring games.
Yeah, there you go. Do something like that.
Play Troy State or Troy, whatever they're calling themselves these days. Play them in April for a spring game. Throw them $750,000.
Spring game is actually a great idea. I love that.
You just need something like. Yeah, if you want to throw these schools a bone, like you feel like it's good for the lifeblood of the sport or whatever, like I get it. Like I get the opportunities that it provides for all these athletes and everything. But like we said before, that's not the response. That shouldn't be the responsibility of those major schools. Like, and in terms of Tennessee, I don't know if Tennessee's going to argue that much about getting rid of the Alabama game. They're like,
but that's not forever. Tennessee,
if
Alabama,
we have
Alabama's
to
not
get rid of
like
Alabama,
that's a Saban thing. Like,
for sure,
the Shula stuff still happened. Like, Alabama has not been like the Nick Saban, as crazy as it sounds, is not going to be at Alabama forever. Someone's going to eventually have to follow him, and they might get the guy behind him wrong. That might happen, and
for sure.
I think
you're going to see the most. Hang up with someone like Tennessee is like not having Georgia on the schedule every year, not having Kentucky on the schedule every year. Like that's even like a low key rivalry as well. So like you're going to lose some of that, but I think it's worth it because okay, you might not play Kentucky every year, but you play them every other year. And I think that's worth it to not go 8 years without playing LSU or 8 years without playing Ole Miss or something. Like I think the fact that like I'd be willing to give up a certain traditional game every year if I'm still getting it every other year, and then I'm getting a bunch more good games every other year. Because I think that's what people kind of.
But if
forget.
you're a South Carolina fan, are you willing to give up Clemson, South Carolina for another conference game?
No, you can't give up that game. So,
but see, that's something you're going to run into is like some of the non-conference rivalry games, like Georgia Tech. I don't think any Georgia fan like actually needs to play Tech anymore, and that was like one of the things we learned about 2020 was I don't think there was any Georgia or even Tech fan that was like, I really wish we had played that game at the end of the year. That was not having clean old-fashioned hate was rough for us.
For sure, right? Like Georgia Tech, they're like we needed that game with some national eyes on us. No one cared about any of the games we played since we didn't play Georgia. But I honestly started thinking, like, as a person who just like we've talked about, just remembers ridiculous things about sports. Like I started thinking about the Georgia. I don't know what it was the other day. I started thinking about the Georgia Tech game from this past year, and I was like. Usually, like every game from like just about every season, I can like kind of remember like, oh yeah, that was that game where we did this. I remember that George Pickens touchdown, or just a pick six or something random. Like there was not a play from the 2021 Georgia Tech game that I really could remember off the top of my head. I'm like I remember a couple years ago when Fromm hit who's Akil Crumpton, like down the sideline, like late in that Georgia Tech game. That was 2019. Like I was like racking my brain. I was like, was it a home game or was it a road game? Like the game, it's the season finale, and it's like it's so irrelevant at this point. But
yeah,
so that's with Georgia Tech. But like with Florida State, like you can't lose that game. You can't lose Clemson, South Carolina. You can't lose like Louisville. Kentucky and Louisville doesn't have the same cachet behind it, but it's the same in-state rivalry. Like you have to have those games, and if you like we talked about, if you're not worried about Kent State and Toledo on your schedule, then it's not a problem to keep those that one locked Power 5 game because you can still get I guess if we're talking about going to 9 games, then that's basically 10 games that are locked once you add that in-state rivalry in. But you still have 2 games to play with. So,
and that's just better for the fans. It's better. Like that should be the biggest lesson of 2020 is that, man, it's better for the sport when we start off with Ole Miss, Florida. Like we just get more excited. Yeah. We're like, all right, let's go. This is happening. Games that matter immediately. And I was talking to the Marable head football coach earlier today. On the podcast, Marable, and he just great stuff from Coach Derek Hunt, and it was great talking to him. But one of the things he brought up is like their schedule to start off this fall is just like 4 straight out of the gate. Like they open with the rival, and they got just a murderer's row the first month of the season. I asked him, I was like, as a coach, do you like starting with cupcakes? Would you rather start and really get used to your new roster and kind of work through the kinks and stuff? He's like, no, I don't care if we lose this game early in the season. We learn something. I care about what we are in November, not in September or August. So I think a lot of coaches are probably wired like that, where I think fans think that it's great to start off with the cupcakes and kind of work it out. But I think if you ask most coaches, they're like, no, I'd rather play real competition right away and see where we're at and learn from it. Like, people are so scared of the losses, the buy-in losses, and getting App State if you're Michigan, that like you're missing the broader point where it's like, if you're losing App State in a buying game, you weren't winning anything anyway. Like that means you were not that good anyway. So if that's a serious concern, then guess what? You have bigger problems. But
I think Shane Bieber said the opposite recently, right? I think he made a comment that college football is the only sport out there that doesn't have some sort of scrimmage, some sort of tune-up game. And I think because you see it in the preseason in the NFL, like that sort of thing.
Why don't we do that? The buying games just become preseason. Like we do 2 of those in August. Like 7-on-7.
Yeah, maybe 1. Like I don't know if about 2, but yeah, I mean that's even an idea. Like the game doesn't count, but like people would just be so starving for football at that point.
Yeah.
Like they would probably show up, you know? So I don't know. There's ways to fix it for sure. Because I do and especially because I feel like there's probably an advantage to having a tune-up game. Like when you're talking Maryville, you're talking about high school or college. So in high school, it's like, yeah, like exactly. It's all about the playoffs. So it's all about, building your team up and being in a position to, kind of grow as the season goes along and be playing your best ball at the end of the year. So with college football, that's just not the case. You just have to be perfect if you want to win something substantial. And you have some teams over here playing nationally ranked opponents on their own field week 1, and you have other teams going 3 to 4 weeks before they play a Power 5 school. So it's like you just got to do something about that so we have some sort of just fairness across the board, like some sort of universal kind of strength of schedule that like you're never going to have everyone play the same strength of schedule, but you could at least make strides to like try to make it better. Like if Auburn, like looking at Georgia's schedule, like how bad it looks this year, like part of that's like Florida's rebuilding, right? Like Auburn looks, no one really knows what's going on with Auburn right now. It's like Auburn and Tennessee on those rotations of Georgia's schedule should be like their 2 most, exciting home games essentially. And, Tennessee is gonna do something this year, but Auburn, like, yeah, it's a rivalry, so people are gonna show up and they're gonna be pumped for it. But it's not a big time game really. So you're not gonna be able to really legislate teams just going through down periods. But if you're playing just all Power 5 schools and just playing the same number of conference opponents and everything, like it's gonna go a long way in helping some of that uneven scheduling.
I would agree. Well, let's move to a different subject matter here, Matt Green. Emory Jones, after months and months of wondering where he was going to go, he will be replacing Jaden Daniels at Arizona State. What do you make of Emory Jones joining Herm and the Sun Devils?
I just don't know how excited we can be about Emory Jones. Like in the Pac-12, it's gonna be against worse competition. So like maybe he can be better. Like I'm not too excited. Like looking at Emory Jones this past year, he was sacked fewer times than any quarterback in the SEC. Did you know that? Only sacked 11 times all year, and he was 7th in the conference in pass attempts. So it's not like just some guy who was just running the ball all the time. So he was sacked the fewest times in the entire SEC and also threw the most picks in the SEC. Tied with Will Levis, actually, for the most picks in the SEC. So 19 touchdowns or 13 picks. Like, obviously, his legs are an element of his game. But, like, if you're getting protected that well and you're still not really doing – and also Florida didn't have a good defense. So you're talking a team that needed to score points – and their starting quarterback only threw 19 touchdowns. Granted, Anthony Richardson started a couple games here and there, but I don't know. I can't get too excited about Emory Jones personally.
Yeah, same here. It's fine. It's better competition for him, or better. When I say better competition, it's a better situation potentially with the Pac-12 schedule and what he'll be dealing with. But I mean, Arizona State's just a huge question mark right now. Losing their OC and DC this offseason, the investigation with the Sun Devils, they're in a weird spot, man. I don't know. The Sun Devils are one of the more difficult teams to get a read on. They have so many holes to fill and a lot of transfer stuff they still got to iron out. So I don't know. They're a wait and see, but hey, Emory Jones having a bounce back year in Tempe wouldn't be the biggest surprise in the world, just based on different scenario out west, change of scenery. I don't know. Like one of Bo Nix and Emory Jones have to work out, right? Going out west. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe. That is interesting.
So this was interesting too. From Football Scoop, they pulled this up. Football Scoop's one of my favorite football sites to peruse on a daily basis. But they had this from Iowa's AD, Gary Barta, who so this comes from Football Scoop, so go check it out there if you have not already done so. But Barta on the Fight for Iowa podcast, they found he had this idea for slowing roster churn in college athletics, and he pushed for rolling back the free one-time transfer without consequence. And it's interesting because I love the Ion college basketball podcast on CBS with Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander, and I was listening to them on my walk this afternoon from campus back to my car, and I vehemently disagreed with their assertion because they were like killing Barta for this. And like, it's just one of those things where it's like, this is the change. You got to get on board. Like, you're not going back. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And this is now a fair system. And a lot of coaches and ADs don't like that it's fair now.
Is that true? Like, can we not put the toothpaste? It seems like they're trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube.
They're at least trying. But I also think, okay, I can understand the player friendly stuff, and I'm pro player. I think most people are pro player. That can be true. That being said, one of the things that I've noticed with national media about this is that they're missing is that you still have to factor in fan enjoyment and what the fans who go to these games want. So it can be more fair. However, if you are a fan of these college teams, the Jordan Addison thing should be a wake-up call that, like, this is a problem. Like, if there's a scenario where Larry Fitzgerald does not finish at Pitt and instead finishes at LSU or Florida or Georgia because he had this breakout early campaign in Pitt and he transfers and finishes there, that is a problem. That is not a great thing. So you're like, well, it's pro player, that's it. Get on board and suck it up. It's like, well, I don't know, like attendance is going down and you have to be wary of where the sport's going, where too much change, where it's like, if I want this to be totally like the pros, I'll just watch the pros. Like part of like the dismissal of this being a problem now is silly to me, where it's like, you can be pro player and understand that it's better for Jordan Addison to do this potentially. It might not, because Carson Wentz, Trey Lance, they both were quarterbacks at North Dakota State in FCS. They go first, like, top 10 in the draft. Like, they're Carson Strong, Nevada. He gets drafted. Like, you go up and down the list. Bailey Zappi, Western Kentucky.
Larry Fitzgerald is literally a star wide receiver from Pitt that was drafted,
exactly.
Second overall?
He just won his big award, and he's going to be a first-round pick if he stays at Pitt. And you're going to get paid. And I understand that, like, maybe he wants to go win a title because you can't win a championship at Pitt, and you can go win one at maybe Texas, USC, whatever. Like, Alabama. If he ends up at Alabama, like, they have a need. They're putting a lot of their eggs in the Trey Burton basket, but like, I don't know. It's just that.
And then Jermaine Burton,
yeah. What did I say? Trey Burton?
That's Florida, right?
Florida, yeah, the Florida guy.
Quarterback / tight
end, and then was with the Bears, yeah. But I think it's just, they're overlooking this stuff, man, and I'm like, talk to fans. That's not good. Like, I think it's one of those things where, especially if you're getting paid now, and NIL is a big thing where it's like, we have to incentivize player movement to players to stay with their programs and like throw a bone to these coaching staffs that are able to develop a Jordan Addison. That it's like, oh, awesome, we got to see this guy when he came in raw on campus and then develop in our program, and now he's a cornerstone and we can use him as like just kind of a leader for the next receiver who wants to be like, hey, do you want to be like a Jordan Addison and Larry Fitzgerald? Come to Pitt. Or do you want to go the other way where it's like, we can develop you for a little bit and then we'll get you paid by the next big Power 5 program that you can go make more money and all that and finish out your career like that. That's not what any fan wants. And that's not something that Pitt fans want. That's not what any smaller program wants. And it's like, okay, well, that's a problem. So you have to say that, like, how do we fix or how do we incentivize players to stay put when they're in good situations, when things are going well, and to stop the poaching and stop the tampering? Like, you have
like
to talk about this in Subway.
Yeah, like the NBA has the rule, is that what the bird years are or something, where the team
Bird
that
rights.
rights, the team that drafts you can pay you more than you can make on the open market. So we don't have this salary cap situation in college football yet. But it's just funny how every time this is brought up, it's like the response is okay boomer, right? It's just like, well, you just don't want what the players want, whatever. But there is something that's made a lot of us prefer college football over pro football for years. And it's not necessarily just the amateur model. Like, a lot of people think these guys have been getting paid, for decades. Like, you don't really know what's true. They've been getting something. You don't really know what exactly is true. But it's reasonable to think if this sport looks less and less like the sport that I preferred to the NFL, then I'm no longer going to care as much about this sport. And and the fans are what make college football, I think, more than better than the NFL. It's just the traditions, I feel like the sheer decibel level. I feel like when you turn on a college football game, like on a Saturday, like the place the crowd energy just seems like a different level than an NFL game. Like it's there's something to it. So it's a really tough one. I'm glad once you brought this up on the pod, I don't know if that was last week or a couple weeks ago. Right when you said it, I was like, that's not something I've thought of, but I like that idea because we've talked about the controlled variables. Like, they just threw all of these variables in at the same time and like, oh, good luck with this sport. Like, hopefully it's not unrecognizable in 10 years, right? So I'm all for that because I think the other ones are just so difficult really to put the toothpaste back in the tube. Like, I don't understand how they're going to retroactively say some of these NIL deals are like not valid or not legal. Like, I don't know if these guys have signed papers or whatever.
Well, they can't win. Like, Tennessee has their own NIL laws that, like, they were ahead of the curve in that. Like, you're just not beating the courts. Like, a lot of these, like, every state has their own law. Like, it's just not happening. Like, you're not winning these. You're going to lose.
The NCAA does not have a good record when going to court for
they
these
will
things
lose
either. Yeah, so it's like that doesn't seem like something you can really do, even though they're trying to do it. So, but the one-time transfer, that does seem like something that you can't like close the portal up, right? Like this is good for the players to go in there and okay, what teams are interested in me now? But like this, we have
have windows.
Exactly. And like with Zay Flowers too at Boston College talking about being offered $600,000 or whatever the case, and he chose to stay at Boston College. Like, most guys are probably not going to turn down big time money to especially like, who knows who was offering Zay Flowers that money? Probably a team that has a better chance to win a national championship than Boston College. So it's one thing if you get in the portal and now it's free agency and you're going to go to the highest bidder. It's another thing if people are bidding on you before you're even in the portal. And that's definitely an issue that we got to do something about. Like, you're never like with how these guys, these players, like as prospects go to these camps and communicate with one another. Like, you're not going to be able to prevent wide receiver from so-and-so school from texting another wide receiver from like, yeah, you should definitely come here. Like, we run a great offense, whatever. We got great quarterback play. Like, you're not going to be able to prevent that. But for coaching staffs, for boosters to reach out to these actual players, like, I'll give you this much money to come here. I think we all agree, like, that's not what we had in mind when NIL was presented.
Yeah. I think it's just the one we've all been okay with is the grad transfer, like the Jamie Newman thing where he did all the stuff. Like, that one didn't sit wrong with Wake fans where it's like, no, he was awesome for Wake. And then it was it. And then he had a chance to really jump into the national title scene and go win a ring. Like, the graduate transfer makes sense. And it's also incentivized more schooling. Like, you're just going to get your master's. Yeah.
And if there's any student athletes out there to want to throw a bone to like you don't have to sit out. It's the guys that got their degree. Like how many times are they propping these guys up? Oh, they're students before they're athletes. They're 99% will go pro in something other than sports. Like we've heard all of these just key phrases for years. Like it makes so much sense to reward the guys that have gotten a degree at the school they went to, but to just be not satisfied of the amount of playing time you guys as freshmen, so now you're going to bounce. Like, we can't keep anybody from doing the things they want to do, but like Larry Fitzgerald, if he wants to sit out a year after his breakout freshman year at Pittsburgh and then go to Florida, like there's nothing you can do to stop. He's got free will as a human being, right? But to not make it so easy, right? If Justin Fields knows he has to sit out a year, if he goes to Ohio State, then he might put in the work to try to win that starter job.
But also,
for one more year
tampering won't happen because they're like, well, we're not going to go above and beyond because we can't get this guy right away. Like, we're not going to wait on this kid. So
yeah, and it's just the immediate impact, like the fact that Lincoln Riley can go to USC and also recruit like 8 to 10 of his key players and bring them along with him. Like that's a red flag right there. I think almost more than anything else. Like we know how these coaches can move. Like the idea of these coaches bringing players with them, like I'm not a fan of that at all.
But that's what they should do. Lincoln Riley's doing what he's supposed to do. Like this
under
is
the
how
rules.
Yes.
I can't hate on him, but that's why I feel like something's got to be done about these rules because I don't think that's not what people want out of college football, in my opinion. I don't know if I can speak for everybody in college football, but I think the general fan out there, that's not what they had.
The general
in mind.
fan is not happy about the player movement right now. Like it's just
we want Todd Gurley to be able to sign some autographs and make some money
Yes.
for it because any student on UGA's campus could sign some autographs or could make some CDs and sell them on campus or something like that. Like any student can do something like that, and so when you have athletes not allowed to do the things that other students are allowed to do, that's when it kind of doesn't sit right with you. But yeah, just the pay for play, players just going to the highest bidder. I don't know. It already happens to an extent. I think it's getting a little out of control. Like, when Nick Saban says it, everyone agrees. When Dabo says it, he's an out of touch boomer. So like it's somewhere in between.
Well, let's hit our main event, Matt Green. SEC title betting odds are out. Teams, we're going to do this each week for a couple weeks. We're going to hit on the big conferences and where Vegas sees the winners and most likely to win their conference. And we got to start with where it just means more. People forget that in the South it just means more to win the SEC. But let me rattle off where the odds come, and I won't give the plus whatever. I'll just do from order of least likely to most likely to win the SEC this upcoming year. So it's not just winning your division, it's win the SEC outright. So that includes the conference title game. So Vanderbilt, Missouri, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Auburn, LSU, Arkansas, Tennessee, Florida, Kentucky, Ole Miss, A&M, Georgia, and Alabama. Matt Green.
So right off the bat, the one I'm most surprised about, I would have to say either Ole Miss or Kentucky. Like I'm surprised to see Ole Miss have the fourth best.
That's what I was going to say. Is Ole Miss is the biggest shocker to me.
And also like Kentucky,
they're plus 4,000.
And Kentucky and Florida ahead of Tennessee. Like that baffles me personally. I almost would put Tennessee ahead of A&M, like just because of Alabama. Like I think when you're coming out of the East, I think there's a better chance that someone not named Georgia comes out of the East than someone not named Alabama comes out of the West. Personally, so I think that right there, I would personally put Tennessee's odds higher than Texas A&M for that reason.
That's interesting. I hadn't considered that. I mean, Kentucky's just got so many question marks. You have a new OC, Rich Gangarello, who was the quarterback's coach at San Francisco this past year, and they brought in the offensive line coach there to coach them, and they're replacing Ali and Wandale out wide. I mean, I don't know. Like, Kentucky, we'll see, but Kentucky, even when they're good, they still can't beat Tennessee. They were a better team all last year. They won 10 games, and they still couldn't beat Tennessee at home. And just the rivalry is just extremely lopsided. So until that happens, I'm not putting Kentucky above them. But Florida is the one where it's like Vegas, when you look at different Florida odds, there's something about Florida that Vegas likes, and I don't know what it is. Like, is it just Richardson has this ultimate upside where they think that there is a path to Richardson just being like the best, like when people are talking about Jackson Dart and Spencer Rattler and insert player name here in the SEC, Max Johnson, they're like, well, we actually think our intel tells us that Richardson might actually be the best of the bunch and that he might be the best gamble of the bunch. And I don't know, like he had a good spring game and he's definitely the most he's like the highest upside, I think, of everybody in that group. Best case scenario, so maybe that's what it is. It's like he's a best case scenario guy, and that's scary if you're a Tennessee Kentucky fan.
And I wonder how much it's like, does Vegas like Florida? Does Vegas like Anthony Richardson, or do they know the general public is going to pick Richardson. Florida, or or is gonna get excited about this guy who's a great athlete, it's got a strong arm, like that's what gets people excited, right? So I don't know if it's hard to know because that's the general public is what's in mind when Vegas sets these odds. Florida's schedule is no joke. Like I remember when we were going through those teams with losing records last year, the ones most likely to have a winning record this year. And I said Florida, and then right when you responded with their schedule, I'm like, I'm not so sold on Florida now that I think about it. So like just looking at their schedule with like Utah, Tennessee, A&M, LSU, Georgia on there, like that's not even including Kentucky and South Carolina, who like those are honestly toss-up games coming into 2022 for Florida. So Florida's got way too many just question mark games on there to be the sixth best odds to win the SEC. Like I don't see that this year. Ole Miss is the team I'm just confused about. Like I feel like I'm missing. I'm questioning my own thoughts about Ole Miss because I see so much positivity about them, and I'm just not sure they're going to repeat what they did in 2021.
I would agree. I also think that just giving them better odds in Arkansas is silly. So they're plus 4,000 and Arkansas is plus 6. Like I just don't see Ole Miss being better than Arkansas this upcoming year. Like I don't like those odds. A&M at plus 1,200. I mean, I don't love that. I don't know. Like, would you? It sounds like so. You're saying it's way more likely that a team in the East dethrones Georgia than a team in the West dethrones Alabama.
Yeah, I think A&M, like right now, like neutral site game, A&M and Tennessee tomorrow, I'm going to take Texas A&M. But, like, I don't know how Tennessee, I'm waffling back and forth now because Tennessee does have Georgia and Alabama on their schedule. So that makes it a little bit different coming out of the East. So I feel like A&M does have an edge on Tennessee. I just don't see them getting out of the West with less than 2 losses, honestly. Yeah. And that's what it's going to take. Like Alabama doesn't lose 2 games in the regular season. Like I think they did with Tua's last year when he got hurt and Mac Jones took over. Like I think that's maybe their only 2-loss regular season since Cam Newton's national championship year. I think they lost like 3 games that year. So Alabama's not going to lose more than 1 game. So A&M to win the West has got to go 11-1, and I don't think I see that happening.
Here's the money.
11-1 and beat Alabama.
Yeah. I think the money throw is Tennessee at plus 6,000 or Auburn, I think, at plus 15,000. Like Auburn is the one where it's like if everything goes right, like Auburn, they played Alabama close last year. Like they're a shot in the dark, man. Auburn is the mercurial. Just who freaking knows, man? What happens this fall with Brian Harsin and company? Like they're all Boise now, and they had the weird offseason from hell. Like what if Zach Calzada is just the perfect fit for what Brian Harsin's trying to do, and they were able to keep Tank there. So maybe that all just works the right way. next year.
If I'm going for that plus 15,000 long shot,
Yeah.
I think I go with South Carolina.
Oh no.
Like Auburn is obviously their ceiling is way higher than South Carolina when they're good. But it goes back to that East thing. They got Georgia at home this year. Like I don't think South Carolina's gonna go 11-1 by any means. I think those teams are appropriately down in 9th, 10th, 11th best odds to win the SEC. But I would probably take Arkansas. I think Arkansas seems like a good like dark horse in terms of just like big return on your bet at what plus 6,000 as well. So I don't know. It's hard to envision anyone other than Georgia and Alabama being in the SEC championship when December comes. But if I had to take one team on this entire list to win the SEC that's not Georgia, Alabama, I honestly think I would take Tennessee.
Interesting. I mean, everything Tennessee comes down to Florida. Like, whatever happens in week 4 against Florida is just going to define this season. And there's just so much pressure going into that one. It's like, if you're not beating them this year at home in Neyland, when are you getting over this hump? When is it happening? So, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'm excited for it, but we still got several months to go. And
without a doubt. A 10-win regular season for Tennessee, and the Vols are officially back. You know, they may not want to proclaim it like Sam Ellinger or anything, but I think a 10-win regular season would just be an absolute home run for Tennessee this year.
10-win regular season is an SEC East berth, like championship berth. Because that means we're beating one up. Like, we're not, like, I don't
But
think...
see, no, you go 10 wins and lose to Alabama and Georgia's 12-0 or 11-1.
I think they split those. Like, Tennessee would split that in a 10-win season. I don't think they just lose to the two best teams in the conference. I think if they go 10-2, something like that, it's like they upset Georgia or something and then lose the dumbest game possible to, like, Kentucky or Florida or...
See, but you're not getting in the SEC championship doing
that,
though. I feel like you gotta...
That's true.
Yeah, I
need Georgia to go away. I need Georgia to go away.
You got to beat Georgia for sure if they're going to be in the SEC championship. And in Athens, I don't know if this is necessarily the year to do that. If it was in Knoxville, I think that would be an upset candidate for sure. Like I've already seen, I don't know if it's that SEC Mike guy on Twitter, throw out South Carolina beating Georgia week 3. So like, it is in Williams-Brice Stadium, but that
was more of a Mark Richt thing. And I mean, I guess you had the one
Steve Spurrier too.
Yeah.
I think it was Steve Spurrier. I think that's what so many South Carolina fans like. I think that's what kind of gives them a warped perception of how good their program can be. Is like Steve. It took literally the greatest coach or one of the greatest coaches in college football history to make this program competitive, right? Like, I mean, they're more than competitive, winning 11 games like 3 years in a row, like winning the East one year. Like they were really good, but it took just all kinds of tricks up the old ball coach's sleeves, right? Like he just has a way, and then obviously Georgia having a couple key players suspended for one of those early games usually helped out South Carolina as well. But I think that. Like Shane Beamer is like, oh yeah, we got our guy again. We're gonna be right back to competing with Georgia every year, and I'm not sure it's that easy. I think Steve Spurrier, they might not really realize how good of a coach, how great of a coach Steve Spurrier was. Like this schedule is tough. Like
here's my take: they're not going to a bowl game. Like they're winning 5 games. Like they're not going to a bowl game.
I mean, their schedule is brutal. Who do they have from the West again?
They finished their season with Florida, Arkansas? Tennessee, and Clemson.
Oh, man. And
Florida and Clemson are on the road.
They got A&M and Arkansas from the West, and they're going to have Georgia, and they're going to have Clemson on the schedule. That's going to be brutal. I could see them being a good team and winning 7 games, but I don't know. It'll be interesting. I think they do make a bowl game, though.
I guess they do put in 5 and 7 teams in bowl games now.
They might,
yeah, that's how they get in. Matt Green.
They got to put someone in the Birmingham Bowl.
Exactly. New stadium. They got to fill it. New stadium.
Is it still the Birmingham Bowl? I feel like they changed it last year to something, but I feel like it's like it's the pinnacle of like the irrelevant bowl game. Like at least the Bahamas Bowl, like you get to go to the Bahamas. Yeah. Like
what was that? Toledo, Middle Tennessee State this past year? Who was that? I don't remember off the top of my head.
I'll take your word for that one.
Matt Green. We can find you on Twitter at Matt_W_Green. All kinds of great college football content over there, even when you're not egging on other folks. When I disagree with our friend of the pod, Late Kick with Josh Pate on head coaching eliteness. But Matt, thank you as always, my friend, and I'll talk to you next